Number 10. Unnamed Czech filmmaker. In 2014, the member of a film crew was attacked by a pet lion in the Czech Republic while shooting a documentary at the owner's home. 53-year-old SS Basista was living with two adult lions, Alex and Mijanka, which he'd raised since they were cubs. Basista received constant complaints from his neighbors, who described the felines as killers. Nevertheless, he and his family maintained they weren't aggressive. Alex and Majinka were allowed to roam freely around the house, and Basista would often join them in their rough-and-tumble antics. As the production crew arrived at their home in Stupava, Majinka was wandering around the living room. Suddenly, she pounced on the back of a filmmaker and sank her claws into his flesh. The owners were on standby and, after a brief struggle, managed to wrestle her away. The filmmaker sustained minor flesh wounds. Even though it would have taken mere seconds for Mijanka to inflict critical injuries, Basista insisted that she was only playing. Number 9. Austin Hatfield. Florida teenager Austin Hatfield found a cottonmouth near his Wimorma home in 2014 and decided that it would be his new pet. Even though the snake possessed a deadly venomous bite, 18-year-old Hatfield kept it in a pillowcase in his room. According to his best friend, Jason Belcher, the teenager would kiss the snake on its head and mouth, completely disregarding the dangers to which he was exposing himself. Cottonmouths are known to be somewhat skittish in nature, but will readily defend themselves if they feel threatened. On a Saturday night, the snake slithered out of the pillowcase, across Hatfield's stomach and off the bed. As the teen tried to recapture it, he was bitten. Belcher was in the kitchen when Hatfield walked in and asked to be taken to the hospital immediately. He was in critical condition on arrival, but was treated with antivenom and eventually stabilized. It was reportedly illegal for Hatfield to have the cottonmouth at his home, since keeping venomous snakes require special permits. Number 8. Vladimir. In 2015, a 21-year-old Russian man identified by his first name as Vladimir was killed by the king cobra he'd kept as a pet. The incident took place at the man's apartment in the city of Tolyatti. It was there that, aside from the cobra, Vladimir also kept a green mamba and a red spitting cobra. His social media featured numerous pictures of him and his venomous pets. His girlfriend, Anna, claimed that he'd like to play with the snakes and wasn't afraid of them. She was in the apartment when Vladimir was bitten by the cobra. The animal had reportedly attacked him as he was trying to feed it. Anna immediately called an ambulance, but there was nothing more that the paramedics could do for him when they arrived at the residence. Within minutes of the bite, Vladimir had passed away in Anna's arms. Number 7. Mikhail Prasik. 33-year-old Mikhail Prasik kept two lions, a male and a female, in the back of his home in the village of Zdechov, Czech Republic. He didn't have a license for the animals, which he'd been breeding illegally and housing in cages of his own design. In spite of multiple fines and concerns expressed by local residents, Prasik refused to relocate his exotic pets or to allow anyone representing local authorities onto his property. They were at an impasse because there was no evidence of animal cruelty, and keeping the lions wasn't outright illegal due to a lack of alternative facilities in the country. Prasik made headlines in 2018 when he was out walking his lioness on a leash and a cyclist crashed into it. The cyclist suffered some scratches that required treatment, and local authorities at the time deemed it a traffic accident. In 2019, Prasik's father found him in the pen of his 9-year-old male lion. He had been fatally mauled and the pen was reportedly locked from the inside. Police were called to the scene and shot both lions, an action they deemed had been absolutely necessary in order for them to retrieve Prasik's body. A local news outlet reported that the lioness was pregnant at the time. Number 6. Dean Armstrong. In August of 2012, a man from Cambridge, England, nearly died after he was stung by his pet scorpion. Dean Armstrong had grown up surrounded by exotic animals, as his father had owned a zoo in the 1960s. Since his late teens, Armstrong had started his own collection of reptiles and arachnids. He was in his early 40s when he got Sue the scorpion from a local pet shop. The owners had had trouble selling her because she only had one pincer, which meant that she struggled to hold food. Armstrong was trying to feed her a cricket when Sue whipped her tail over. The man had been stung or bitten by his pets numerous times, but remembered at that moment feeling fear for the first time. Within a minute of being stung, Armstrong collapsed. Fortunately, he was almost immediately discovered by his cleaner, who called the emergency services. He was rushed to Whipps Cross Hospital in East London, where he received a blood transfusion meant to flush the venom out of his system. When he woke up, he was paralyzed on the right side of his body and he couldn't speak. Armstrong was relieved about an hour later when the effect had passed, not knowing that it was only the beginning of his ordeal. The venom had severely damaged his pancreas, and weeks later, he was in surgery to have the organ drained of the toxins. Another year passed before he suffered further complications from the initial sting, when a cyst broke in his stomach and he started vomiting blood. Armstrong underwent life-saving surgery. When he came to, doctors told him that they'd removed his stomach, gallbladder, half his pancreas, and some intestines. Even though he'd have to carry a colostomy bag around for the rest of his life, Armstrong felt fortunate to have survived. Number 5. Sharon Miller. In the late 1990s, Sharon Miller purchased a tarantula that her 8-year-old daughter had wanted from a Lake Forest pet shop in California. Miller knew that it could bite, but that the venom, barring a severe allergic reaction, generally had very low toxicity towards humans. However, she was completely unaware of a second and arguably more effective defensive response. The woman reached into the spider's cage to clean it, but suddenly felt discomfort in her eyes. As she rubbed them, they became red and extremely painful. She compared the sensation to having burning grains of sand in her eyes. What the pet store had reportedly failed to tell her was that when faced with larger attackers, tarantulas will flick their hind legs forward and fling hairs from their abdomen into the air. The arachnids can be quite precise in directing their attack. Their hairs aren't soft, but more like minuscule barbs that are meant to affect their target's sight. Miller was left with blurred vision after several of the tarantula's hairs got lodged in her right eye. She subsequently sued the pet shop for medical expenses and emotional distress, arguing that they'd failed to warn her about the dangers of owning the exotic pet. Number 4. Norman Bowalda. In 2010, Norman Bowalda, chairman of the Canadian Exotic Animal Owners Association, was fatally mauled by a massive tiger he'd kept at his property in Southwold, Ontario. Nobody witnessed the attack, which claimed 66-year-old Bowalda's life. A family member who'd found his mangled remains was able to lock the 650-pound Siberian male in a separate portion of the cage. When officers arrived at the scene, it was visibly agitated, pacing back and forth in its enclosure. It hadn't been the first attack to occur on Bowalda's property. A few years prior, in 2004, a person from Toronto suffered severe head and neck injuries after being mauled by one of his tigers. They survived and recovered with treatment. Southwold's deputy mayor told a media outlet that the township had lost the case that would have forced Bowalda to get rid of his exotic pets. In a dark, ironic twist, one of the animals that he'd fought so hard to keep ultimately ended his life. The fate of the tiger remains unclear. Number 3. Daniel Brandon. On August the 25th of 2017, Englishman Daniel Brandon was killed by his pet African rock python at his family's home near Basingstoke in North Hampshire. The 31-year-old had owned the 8-foot serpent, named Tiny, since she was small enough to fit in his hand. In the wild, an African rock python will use its formidable strength to constrict antelopes, monkeys, and even small crocodiles, which it then devours whole. Brandon kept several other snakes and was never scared of Tiny, according to his mother. However, she reported that the snake would sometimes lash out at her when she entered the room. On the night of Brandon's death, the woman remembered a thud coming from his room, but thought that he'd knocked something over or dropped a piece of fitness equipment. She later found him unresponsive and Tiny coiled under a cabinet. A coroner ruled without doubt that Brandon had died from asphyxiation following contact with the python. Today's topic was requested by Fawn and In Case of Rain. If you have any other topics you'd like to learn about, subscribe and let us know in the comments section below. Number 2. Sochiro Mori. In 2018, a Japanese man was mauled to death by the Asian black bear he'd been hired to care for. 56-year-old Sochiro Mori had gone to the residence located northeast of Tokyo. It was there that the bear's owner, an unnamed 70-year-old man, was keeping it in an enclosure. Based on the reports of local authorities, he had the necessary permits for the bear, which stood at 4 foot 2 inches and weighed an estimated 110 pounds. Mori, who was the animal's caretaker, had entered the cage, but before long, a neighbor heard him screaming. The neighbor went to the house and found Mori severely mauled in the animal's enclosure. He was taken to the hospital, where he was later pronounced dead. Number 1. Paul and Mandy McDonald. In 2019, an Australian couple was brutally attacked by a deer that kept at their farm in Moihu, northeast Victoria. 47-year-old Paul McDonald was feeding the wapiti, a cross between a red deer and an elk, when it unexpectedly lunged at him. His wife, 45-year-old Mandy, intervened, but sustained devastating injuries to her leg and upper body. Their teenage son witnessed the incident and ran to get help. Police officers arrived at the scene and fatally shot the deer. Mandy survived, but Paul had been gored to death. The woman was flown to the Alfred Hospital in critical condition, and according to updates on her case, she required over a dozen surgeries on a long road to recovery. In the aftermath of the attack, wildlife authorities warned that male deer, even though they may seem docile the rest of the year, become aggressive come mating season. Thanks for watching. Would you spend the night in the same room with a reticulated python for $5,000? Let us know in the comments section below.